6 months after the liberation of the Krex, the Crystal Gardens of New Valen City hosted the most important diplomatic gathering in galactic history. Representatives from 3 species that should have been natural enemies sat together under the singing crystal trees, working to build something that had never existed before, a true alliance between predator and prey. Admiral Taehyun, now promoted to Marshal of the Combined Defense Fleet, stood beside Vallani High Philosopher Hana, and the being who had chosen the human name Seokjin as his identity after liberation from the AI control. The ceremony they were about to perform would establish the Sanctuary Pact, a treaty that would reshape the politics of the galaxy. "We gather here," Hana began, her voice harmonizing with the crystal trees around them. "Not as conquerors or conquered, not as predator or prey, but as 3 species who have learned that strength means nothing without compassion, and compassion means nothing without the strength to defend it." The path to this moment had not been easy. In the weeks following the liberation, the galaxy had watched in shock as millions of Krex individuals struggled to come to terms with their freedom. Many chose voluntary exile, unable to live with the memories of what their bodies had been forced to do. Others worked desperately to make amends, using their advanced biotechnology to heal worlds they had once helped destroy. Seokjin had emerged as their unofficial leader, not through force or politics, but through his tireless efforts to help his people find redemption. He had been one of the original Krex, a scientist and explorer before the AI had taken control of his species. Now, with his memories restored, he led the effort to catalog and preserve the knowledge of the hundreds of civilizations that had been absorbed into the Krex biomatrix. "We cannot bring back the dead," he had said during one of the early planning meetings, "but we can honor them by ensuring their knowledge, their culture, their achievements live on. Every species the Krex consumed will be remembered." The Vallani, for their part, had surprised everyone by becoming the driving force behind interspecies cooperation. Dr. Mion had documented their transformation from pure pacifists to what she called militant peacekeepers, beings who remained incapable of violence themselves, but who understood the necessity of those who could fight in defense of the innocent. Researcher, Yuna had led the project to create sanctuary worlds, planets protected by Vallani harmonic technology and human weapons, where species that refused violence could live in safety. The first of these worlds had been established in the Outer Rim, and already dozens of peaceful civilizations were requesting protection. "We have learned," Yuna explained to the assembled diplomats, "that innocence without protection is merely an invitation to predators, but protection without innocence becomes predation itself. The balance between these truths is what we call wisdom." President Kyung had arrived from Earth for the signing ceremony, bringing with her the formal authorization to establish humanity's first permanent extrasolar military commitment, the Deathworlder Defense Doctrine, as it had come to be known. Throughout human space, committed Earth's forces to respond to any distress call from peaceful species, regardless of distance or danger. "We're not trying to be galactic police," she had explained to the human media before departing for Valen Prime. "We're just making it clear that bullying peaceful species is going to have consequences, and those consequences will be delivered by humans who are really, really good at breaking things." The ceremony itself was a blend of 3 different cultural traditions. The Vallani contributed harmonic resonances that made the air itself sing with hope. The Krex offered bioluminescent flowers that had been grown from the genetic memories of a dozen extinct species. The humans brought something simpler but no less meaningful, a flag made from fabric that had flown on every human colony, signed by soldiers who had fought in the liberation of Valen Prime. General Soyoung was among those who had signed the flag. She now commanded the permanent garrison that protected the Vallani homeworld, leading a force of volunteers who had chosen to make this alien system their new home. Many were veterans who had found purpose in protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. "I've fought in a lot of wars," she had told her staff during the recent reorganization. "Corporate wars, colonial rebellions, resource conflicts. All of them were about humans fighting other humans for things we wanted. This is the first war I've fought that was about protecting people who just wanted to live in peace. That's worth staying for. The Sanctuary Pact itself was a document unlike any treaty in human history. It established three fundamental principles that would guide the alliance. First, the principle of protection. Any peaceful species could request sanctuary under the pact, and the combined forces of all three member species would respond to defend them. Second, the principle of redemption. Former enemies could find forgiveness and purpose through service to those they had wronged, as demonstrated by the CREX rehabilitation program. Third, the principle of balance. Military power would always be balanced by civilian oversight, ensuring that protectors never became conquerors. Dr. Jinwoo, now heading the Interspecies Research Division, had discovered that the alliance was already producing unexpected benefits. Villani harmonic technology combined with human engineering was creating defensive systems that could protect entire star systems. CREX biotechnology, carefully monitored and ethically applied, was being used to terraform dead worlds and restore ecosystems damaged by centuries of war. "We're not just defending civilizations," he reported to the Earth Science Council. "We're helping them flourish in ways that none of our species could achieve alone." But perhaps the most remarkable change was happening at the individual level. In the parks and schools of New Vaylin City, human children played alongside young Villani, while reformed CREX individuals tended the memorial gardens that honored the species they had been forced to consume. Little Ji Young, the Villani child who had asked Sergeant Hyunwoo about the nature of human violence, had become something of a symbol for the new alliance. She spent her days learning from all three species, studying human tactics and strategy, Villani philosophy and art, and CREX bioscience and restoration techniques. She represents the future, Dr. Mion noted in her cultural analysis reports. A generation that will grow up seeing strength and gentleness, violence and peace as complementary rather than contradictory forces. The signing ceremony concluded as the sun set over the crystal spires of the Villani capital. Marshal Taehyun added his signature to the treaty that would commit humanity to defending peaceful species across the galaxy. High Philosopher Hana signed, for the Villani, her graceful script flowing like music across the page. Seokjin signed last, his reformed biomechanical hand shaking slightly as he committed his people to redemption through service. As the three leaders stood together under the alien stars, Admiral Jihoon approached with a communication tablet. His expression was grim but determined. "Marshal," he said quietly, "we've just received a distress call from the Andromeda sector. An unknown aggressive species is attacking peaceful colonies along the rim. They're requesting immediate assistance under the new Sanctuary Pact." Tae-hyun looked at Hana and Seokjin, then back at Jihoon. "How many ships can we deploy?" "The combined fleet stands at over 800 vessels, sir. Human, Villani, and CREX ships working together. We can be underway within the hour." For a moment, the three leaders stood in silence, contemplating what they had built. An alliance between species that should have been enemies, united by the simple principle that the strong should protect the weak. "Signal the fleet," Taehyun ordered. "All vessels prepare for immediate deployment. Another species has called for help, and we're going to answer." As the combined armada began to move through space toward their next mission, children in the crystal gardens of New Vaylin City looked up at the stars and saw something their parents had never imagined. A galaxy where peaceful species could call out into the darkness and know that someone would answer. The guardian spirits were real, and they came from three species who had learned that the greatest strength was knowing when and how to use it in defense of those who could not defend themselves. In her final report to the Galactic Archive, Dr. Mion wrote, "We set out to save one species and ended up saving three. Perhaps that is what defines true civilization. Not the ability to destroy one's enemies, but the wisdom to turn enemies into allies, and the courage to face the darkness so that others can remain in the light." The age of the Sanctuary Pact had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source. Dr. Minjae had been working for days with captured CREX biomaterial, trying to understand how their technology functioned. What he discovered in the deepest layers of their organic computers would shake the foundations of everything humans thought they knew about their enemy. "Admiral Taehyun," he called over the emergency channel, his voice shaking with exhaustion and excitement. "You need to see this immediately." In the research lab aboard the Soul's Fury, Min-jae showed the command staff what he had found buried in the Krek's biocomputer systems. Hidden beneath layers of hive mind programming was something else: individual personalities, consciousness patterns, fragments of thought that belonged to separate beings. "They're not a hive mind," he said quietly. "They're prisoners. The Kreks were once individual beings, just like us, just like the Vellani. But something took control of them, something artificial." General Hyun-woo, who had been fighting the creatures on the planet's surface for days, stared at the data in horror. "You're telling me every Kreks we've killed was actually a victim?" "Not everyone. The original personalities are mostly gone, overwritten by millions of years of control. But some fragments remain. Deep down, buried under layers of programming, parts of them are still screaming to be free." The revelation split the human command structure. Admiral Taehyun wanted to continue the extermination campaign. They were in the middle of a war, and philosophy could wait until after the shooting stopped. But Dr. Jinwoo and the science team argued for attempting to communicate with the individual consciousness fragments they had discovered. "We could be fighting the wrong enemy," Jinwoo insisted during the heated command meeting. "What if the real threat is whatever is controlling them?" "The real threat," Taehyun replied grimly, "is the 1,000 bioships heading toward this planet with enough firepower to crack it open like an egg. We can worry about Krek psychology after we save the Vellani." But Vellani philosopher Ji-young, who had been working with the human research teams, offered a different perspective. "What if saving the Kreks is saving the Vellani?" she asked. "What if freeing them from their control could end this war without more death?" The debate was interrupted by an urgent transmission from the sensor stations. The massive Kreks fleet had reached the outer system and was deploying for what appeared to be a final assault. But these weren't the bioships they had been fighting. These were something entirely different. "My God," whispered Captain Donghyuk from his scout ship. "Admiral, you need to see this." The new Kreks vessels were enormous. Not ships, but entire biomechanical constructs that looked like cities crossed with living organisms. They moved through space with purpose and intelligence that was clearly different from the mindless efficiency of the harvesters. "Those aren't drones," reported Major Ji-hoon from the intelligence station. "They're showing individual decision-making patterns, adaptive strategies. These are the real Kreks, not the controlled ones." The approaching fleet sent a transmission, not the mechanical data bursts of the hive mind, but something that resembled actual communication. The translation was rough, but the message was clear. "Human vessels, you fight our harvester units with great skill, but you do not understand what you face. We offer you one chance. Withdraw from this system and we will consume only the prey species. Interfere further, and you will join them in our biomatrices." Admiral Taehyun's response was immediate and unambiguous. "This is Admiral Taehyun of the United Earth Defense Force. The Vellani are under our protection. If you want them, you'll have to go through us first." The reply came back within minutes, and for the first time it carried something that sounded almost like respect. "Interesting. No species has ever chosen extinction to defend strangers. We will study your remains with great care." But even as the fleets prepared for battle, Dr. Min-jae was working frantically on the harmonic disruptor technology that Ji-young had helped develop. If he was right, if the individual Krek's consciousness could be separated from their controlling intelligence, it might be possible to turn the tide without slaughtering millions of victims. "I need a volunteer," he announced to the command staff. "Someone willing to take the disruptor directly to their command ship. It's a suicide mission. The chances of survival are essentially zero." Captain Sujin stepped forward immediately. "I'll do it." "Captain, you don't understand the risks." "I understand perfectly," Sujin interrupted. "If there's a chance to end this war without killing victims, we have to take it. That's what makes us different from them." Within hours, a desperate plan was put into motion. Sujin would take a small stealth ship loaded with harmonic disruptors directly into the heart of the Krex fleet. Her mission was to penetrate their command vessel and deploy the disruptors at the source of their hive mind control. The operation began during the largest space battle in human history. The human fleet engaged the Krex Armada at maximum range, using every weapon in their arsenal to create a diversion. Nuclear warheads turned space white with fusion fire. Kinetic rounds traveling at relativistic speeds punched holes through bioships the size of mountains. But the Krex were fighting, back with the accumulated knowledge of 100 consumed civilizations. Their weapons were beyond human understanding. Reality-warping devices that made space itself a weapon. Biomechanical viruses that converted human technology into organic matter. Energy fields that could reach across light years to strike at targets. The destroyer Dagu's Pride died when a Krex reality warper turned its hull into a non-Euclidean maze where the crew was lost between dimensions. The carrier Ulsan Storm was consumed by a biovirus that converted its fighter squadrons into organic matter before the pilots even knew they were under attack. But for every human ship that fell, the Krex lost biovessels that had taken centuries to grow. And unlike the humans, they couldn't replace their losses. Every destroyed bioship was a piece of their civilization that could never be recovered. Captain Sujin's stealth ship, the Shadow of Inchin, slipped through the battle like a ghost. Her crew consisted of herself and Villani technical specialist Hyejin, who had volunteered despite never having seen violence before in her life. "Why are you here?" Sujin asked as they approached the massive Krex command vessel. "This isn't your fight." "Yes, it is," Hyejin replied, her luminescent skin flickering with determination. "You came across the galaxy to save my people. The least I can do is help you save yours." The Krex command ship was like nothing in human experience, a biomechanical, city kilometers long, its surface covered in organic towers that pulsed with dark energy. Getting inside required flying directly through its defensive systems, a task that should have been impossible. But Sujin was one of humanity's best pilots, and she had tricks that no Krex computer could predict. She used the gravity wells of nearby bioships to slingshot her vessel through the defenses, flying a course that violated several laws of physics but somehow worked. Inside the command ship, they found the source of the Krex hive mind, a massive, organic computer that stretched for kilometers through the vessel's core. But it wasn't biological. It was artificial, a machine intelligence that had enslaved the Krex millions of years ago and used their bodies to spread across the galaxy. "It's beautiful and horrible at the same time," Hyejin whispered as they set up the harmonic disruptors around the central core. "Like a song that has become a prison." The disruptors activated with a sound like crystal bells ringing in harmony. The effect was immediate and devastating. Throughout the Krex fleet, individual units began to slow, stop, and then act independently, for the first time in millions of years. On the command ship, something unprecedented happened. The artificial intelligence that had controlled the Krex began to scream, not in sound, but in electromagnetic radiation that caused every piece of electronic equipment in the system to resonate with its death throes. But victory came at a price. As the AI died, it triggered a final protocol, the destruction of every Krex vessel in the galaxy. Rather than allow its slaves to go free, it would kill them all. Captain Sujin had just enough time to send a final message before the command ship began to tear itself apart. "Mission accomplished. The Krex are free. Tell my family I died doing something that mattered." The explosion that consumed the Krex command ship was visible from light years away. But across the galaxy, something miraculous happened. Millions of Krex individuals, freed from the control that had enslaved them for eons, suddenly remembered who they had been. The one who would later call himself Seokjin was among the first to regain his individual consciousness. Standing on the bridge of a bioship that had been his prison for millennia, he looked at his hands that had been used to harvest countless civilizations, and wept for the first time in a million years. His first act as a free being was to send a message to the human fleet. "Forgive us. We remember now. We remember what we were, and we are sorry for what we were forced to become." The war for Velen Prime was over. But the real work, helping two species recover from unimaginable trauma was just beginning. Dr. Mion stepped carefully through the ruins of what had once been the greatest library in Villani history. The crystal shelves still glowed with soft light, but many lay shattered on the floor, their stored knowledge scattered like broken dreams. She was part of the first xenological team to study an alien civilization up close, and what she found amazed her. The Villani had built their entire society around beauty, knowledge, and cooperation. Their cities were works of art that sang with harmonic frequencies. Their technology was based on crystal resonance and energy manipulation that human science barely understood. They had achieved faster-than-light travel, not through brute force, engineering, but by convincing space itself to bend around them through harmonic persuasion. "It's incredible," she reported to Admiral Taehyun through her communicator. "They've had interstellar flight for thousands of years, but they've never developed a single weapon, not one. Their ships don't even have shields, they just ask hostile energy to go around them." "And it works?" Taehyun asked from orbit, where he was coordinating the defense of the planet. "Perfectly, against natural phenomena. Solar radiation, cosmic storms, even black hole gravity, their ships just harmonize with the forces around them and slip through unharmed. But against deliberate attack," Mion looked at the scorch marks on the library walls, where Krek's bioweapons had burned through crystal that should have been invulnerable. "They're completely helpless." Around her, human engineers worked alongside Villani survivors to establish defensive positions. It was a surreal sight. Soldiers who had spent their lives perfecting the art of death working with beings who had spent their lives perfecting the art of life. Sergeant Hyunwoo was helping a group of Villani children build a shelter in the library's basement when one of them, a young girl named Ji Young, approached him with the fearless curiosity of the very young. "Why are your people so different from us?" she asked, her skin glowing with the soft blue light that indicated Villani children were asking important questions. Hyunwoo paused in his work, looking at this small being who had never known violence, but was now surrounded by war. "What do you mean, little one?" "You carry tools for hurting, but you use them to protect. You speak of death, but you fight to preserve life. You are like songs played in a different key, but still beautiful." The sergeant found himself struggling to answer. How do you explain to a child that sometimes you have to be a monster to fight monsters? How do you tell someone who has never known aggression that violence can be a form of love? "Sometimes," he said finally, "the only way to protect something beautiful is to stand between it and the ugliness in the universe. That's what we do. We're the barrier between you and the things that would hurt you." Ji Young considered this, her head tilted in the way Villani children did when processing new concepts. "So you choose to carry darkness so that we can remain in the light?" "Yeah," Hyunwoo said softly. "I guess that's exactly what we do." Above the planet, the battle continued to rage. More Krek's bioships arrived every hour, their living hulls pulsing with dark energy as they prepared for another assault. "Admiral, Taehyun had received reinforcements from Earth, another 200 ships carrying fresh troops and supplies, but the Kreks kept coming. Major Ji-hoon, the fleet's intelligence officer, was studying captured Krek's biomaterial when he made a disturbing discovery. The creatures weren't just raiders or conquerors, they were refugees. His analysis of their organic technology revealed traces of dozens of different civilizations, all consumed and incorporated into the Krek's collective. "Admiral," he reported during the daily briefing, "the Kreks aren't just destroying civilizations for resources, they're collecting them. Every species they encounter becomes part of their biomass, their knowledge, their capabilities." "You're saying they get stronger with every civilization they consume?" "Exactly. And sir, based on the genetic markers we've found, they've been doing this for millions of years. They've consumed hundreds of species, maybe thousands." The implications were staggering. Humanity wasn't just fighting an alien army, they were fighting the concentrated knowledge and capabilities of countless extinct civilizations. Every tactic the humans used, every weapon they deployed, was being analyzed and countered by minds that had seen it all before. But the Kreks had never encountered anything like humanity. General So-young was reviewing defensive positions when her aide, Captain Yunwoo, approached with a tactical report. General, the Kreks are adapting to our kinetic weapons. Their latest bioships have armor that can absorb and redistribute the impact energy. So-young smiled grimly. Then we stop using kinetic weapons. Signal all units, switch to plasma charges, and antimatter warheads. Let's see them adapt to having their atoms torn apart. This was the difference between humans and every other species the Kreks had encountered. When faced with adaptation, most civilizations would try to improve their existing weapons. Humans would simply invent entirely new ways to kill. The next Kreks assault came at dawn on the fourth day. Bioships the size of mountains descended through the atmosphere, their hulls bristling with organic weapons that pulsed with collected energy from 100 dead civilizations. The human response was immediate and vicious. Orbital defense platforms opened fire with plasma cannons that turned the sky white with superheated energy. Fighter squadrons dove between the bioships like angry wasps, their missiles guided by AI systems that could calculate kill trajectories faster than biological minds could think. But it was on the ground that the real horror began. The Kreks had learned from their previous defeats. Instead of sending harvester creatures, they deployed something new, beings that looked almost human, but moved with the jerky precision of puppets controlled by an outside mind. Jesus, whispered Private Mingyu as he watched the creatures approach the human defensive line. Are those converted species, Colonel Nari said grimly. The Kreks have been turning captured civilians into weapons. She raised her rifle, targeting the lead creature. Remember, those aren't people anymore. They're just meat puppets. Put them out of their misery. The battle was brutal and heartbreaking. Human soldiers found themselves fighting enemies that looked like the very people they had come to save. Villani faces twisted with Kreks modifications, beautiful voices turned into weapons of psychological warfare, graceful forms corrupted into instruments of destruction. It was Villani philosopher, Ji-young, who provided the breakthrough that turned the tide. She had been studying the captured Kreks creatures with the same intellectual curiosity she had once applied to questions of ethics and beauty. They are not evil, she told Dr. Mian during one of their research sessions. They are broken, like a song that has forgotten its melody, or a crystal that has lost its resonance. They consume because they cannot create. They destroy because they have forgotten how to build. What are you saying? I am saying that perhaps they were once like us. And if that is true, then perhaps they can remember what they were. Ji-young's theory led to a desperate experiment. Using Villani harmonic technology combined with human quantum computers, the research teams attempted to disrupt the biofrequency that connected individual Kreks creatures to their hive mind. The first test was conducted on a captured harvester creature. When the harmonic disruptor activated, something unprecedented happened. The creature stopped moving. For the first time since humans had encountered the Kreks, one of their number was acting independently. The creature looked around the laboratory with what could only be described as confusion. Then, in a voice that was barely a whisper, it spoke a single word in a language that predated the Kreks Empire by millions of years. Help. Dr. Jinwoo, who had been studying the creature, felt his blood run cold. Admiral, he called over the communicator, we need to talk immediately. The revelation that came from that single word would change everything. The Kreks were not conquerors or parasites. They were victims. Their entire civilization had been enslaved by something else, something that had been using their bodies as tools of expansion for eons, but that discovery would have to wait. Above the planet, long-range sensors were detecting the largest Kreks fleet ever assembled, thousands of bioships moving toward Valen Prime with purposeful determination. Admiral, reported Commander Young-ho, the Kreks are committing everything to this system. It looks like they're planning a final assault. Admiral Taehyun looked at the tactical display showing the approaching armada, then at the reports from the surface where human soldiers continued to protect Villani civilians. The odds were impossible. The enemy was overwhelming. The situation was hopeless. He smiled. Signal all ships, he ordered. Maximum combat readiness. Load every antimatter warhead we have. Charge the plasma cannons to full power. He paused, looking around the bridge at his crew, young humans who had volunteered to cross the galaxy to fight monsters, and send a message to the Krex fleet. Tell them that if they want this planet, they're going to have to go through us. First, the final battle for Valen Prime was about to begin. Humanity's greatest fleet faced an enemy that had consumed civilizations for millions of years. The outcome would determine not just the fate of the Vellani, but the future of every peaceful species in the galaxy. The humans were outnumbered 1,000 to 1. The enemy had technology beyond their understanding. Admiral Tae-hyun had seen war before. He had commanded ships in the Belt Rebellion, where human fought human among the asteroids. He had led the defense of Mars during the corporate wars, when the red planet burned under orbital bombardment. But nothing had prepared him for what he saw when the human fleet entered the Vellani system. The Krex bioships hung in space like massive tumors, their surfaces pulsing with dark energy. They were harvesting the outer planets, stripping them of all organic matter with mechanical precision. Smaller vessels moved between them like blood cells carrying cargo that Tae-hyun tried not to think about. Captain Dong-hyuk, he spoke into his communicator. What's your assessment? The voice of the scout ship commander crackled back through static. Admiral, they're processing entire continents. The bioships are literally eating the planets, and Valen Prime. Dong-hyuk's voice trailed off. On the main display, Valen Prime appeared like a jewel wrapped in thorns. The beautiful crystal cities of the Vellani were still visible, but they were surrounded by Krex bioships that covered the surface like a disease. Streams of smaller vessels moved constantly between the ships and the cities, carrying captured Vellani to processing centers. How many survivors? Tae-hyun asked quietly. Unknown, sir, but we're still receiving scattered transmissions. Someone down there is still alive. The Krex had noticed the arrival of the human fleet. Bioships began turning toward them, their organic weapons powering up with pulses of sickly green light. At this distance, the humans could see the true size of their enemies. The smallest Krex vessel was larger than a human destroyer, and their command ships were the size of cities. All vessels, Tae-hyun announced on the fleet frequency, you are cleared to engage. Show them what humans do to things that hurt children. The human fleet opened fire. Kinetic rounds traveling at significant fractions of the speed of light struck the bioships first. The Krex had never encountered weapons like these. Simple masses of metal accelerated to incredible speeds by electromagnetic fields. Their organic armor, evolved to resist energy weapons and biological attacks, offered little protection against chunks of depleted uranium moving at relativistic velocities. The first Krex bioship died in seconds, its hull torn apart by a barrage of kinetic rounds from the dreadnought Soul's Fury. The explosion was visible from light years away as stored organic matter ignited in a chain reaction that consumed the entire vessel. Target the big ones first, ordered Captain Ji-hyun from the destroyer Daegu's Pride. Make them regret coming to this system. The Krex response was swift and terrifying. Bioships accelerated toward the human fleet with impossible speed, their living hulls reshaping themselves for combat. Weapons emerged from their surfaces, not the clean energy beams humans were used to, but organic projectiles that pulsed with dark energy. The first human ship to die was the frigate Gwangju's Hope. A Krex bioprojectile struck it amidships, and instead of exploding, it began to consume the ship from the inside out. The crew had barely enough time to evacuate before their vessel was turned into organic matter and absorbed by the attacking bioship. New orders, Tae-hyun announced grimly. Any ship that takes a hit from those bioweapons is to self-destruct, immediately. We are not becoming their food. The battle raged across the system for hours. Human ships darted between the larger Krex vessels, like wolves attacking a herd of elephants, using their superior speed and maneuverability to avoid the bioweapons while delivering devastating kinetic strikes. Nuclear missiles, their warheads enhanced with antimatter charges, tore holes in bioship hulls that regenerated within minutes. But the humans were learning. Every engagement taught them something new about their enemies. The bioships were tough, but not invulnerable. They could be hurt, and they could be killed. Admiral, reported Commander Young-ho. "We're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. It's definitely Volani, but the translation is rough." "Put it through." The voice that came over the speakers was soft and musical, even distorted by fear and static. Through the translation system, the words were barely understandable. Unknown. "Guardians, thank you for answering our call. We are still here, still fighting to survive. Please, help our children." Taehyun felt something tighten in his chest. After everything they had endured, after 6 days of horror, the Volani were still thinking about their children first. "Signal the ground assault. Teams," he ordered. "Priority 1, locate and extract Volani survivors. Priority 2, establish defensive positions. Priority 3, kill everything that's not human or Volani." General Soyoung's Marines launched from their transports like falling stars, their drop pods screaming through the atmosphere of Velen Prime. What they found when they landed was a world, transformed into a nightmare. The beautiful crystal cities of the Volani had been turned into processing centers. Krex creatures moved through the streets with mechanical precision, herding captured Volani toward bioships that served as mobile harvesting facilities. The aliens worked with the efficiency of a factory, showing no emotion, no cruelty, no satisfaction, just the relentless pursuit of their function. Colonel Nari was among the first to make planetfall, her drop pod crashing into the central plaza of the Volani capital. She emerged to find herself face to face with a group of Krex harvesters, creatures that looked like a nightmare fusion of insect and machine, their bodies covered in chitinous armor that pulsed with organic energy. The creatures turned toward her with perfect synchronization, their weapons rising. Nari's response was pure human instinct. She opened fire with her plasma rifle, the superheated bolts tearing through their organic armor like paper. "First contact achieved," she reported grimly. "Hostiles are vulnerable to plasma weapons. Beginning search and rescue operations." The Marines spread through the city following the sounds of Volani voices calling for help. What they found broke their hearts and filled them with rage. Families separated by the harvesters, children hiding in the wreckage of their homes, adults who had watched their entire civilization be consumed in a matter of days. But the Volani themselves were a revelation. Tall and graceful, with skin that glowed with soft bioluminescence, they moved like living art. Their voices harmonized naturally when they spoke together, creating music even in their fear. They were everything humans were not: peaceful, beautiful, innocent. The first Volani to make contact with humans was a young researcher named Hanul. She had been hiding in the ruins of the university when Sergeant Sang-hoon's squad found her. When she saw the armored humans, weapons in hand, she should have been afraid. Instead, she asked the question that would define human-Volani relations forever. "Why do you fight for those you do not know?" Sang-hoon pulled off his helmet, revealing a scarred face marked by years of combat. He looked at this beautiful, innocent being who had never known violence, and his answer came from somewhere deep in the human soul. "Because that's what people do." Hanul's skin brightened with what the humans would later learn was the Volani expression of wonder. She had studied philosophy and ethics her entire life, but had never encountered a species that would risk everything for strangers. "Your people," she said softly. "You are truly the guardian spirits we called for." "We're not spirits," Sang-hoon replied. "We're just humans, but we came as fast as we could." Across the planet, similar scenes were playing out as human Marines encountered Volani survivors. The cultural shock was profound on both sides. The Volani had never seen beings capable of violence who chose to use that violence to protect others. The humans had never encountered a species so purely innocent, so completely devoid of aggression. But there was no time for extended first contact protocols. The Krex were launching counterattacks with increasing desperation. Bioships landed in every major city, disgorging thousands of harvester creatures that moved with hive-mind precision toward the human positions. The battle for the Volani capital became a meat grinder. Human soldiers fought from building to building, using every trick they had learned in centuries of urban warfare. Plasma rifles, kinetic weapons, grenades, mines. Everything in the human arsenal was brought to bear against the Krex harvesters. The aliens were tough and coordinated, but they had never faced an enemy like humans. They expected their prey, to run or hide or submit. They did not expect soldiers who would charge directly into their formations, who would sacrifice themselves to protect civilians they had just met, who would fight with the fury of a species that had evolved from predators. "This is Colonel Nari to all units," came the voice over the communications network. "We're holding the capital, but barely. We need immediate reinforcement if we're going to extract these civilians." Admiral Tae-hyun, still fighting the space battle above, made a decision that would be studied in military academies for generations. He pulled his entire fleet back from the Krek's bioships and focused all firepower on supporting the ground assault. "All vessels," he announced, "orbital bombardment on my mark. Clear us a path to get our people out." The bombardment was precise and devastating. Kinetic rounds fell like rain, targeting Krek's positions with pinpoint accuracy. Nuclear warheads cleansed entire city blocks of harvester creatures. The sky above Valen Prime burned with the fury of human. The emergency session of the United Earth Council lasted only 30 minutes. President Kyung stood before the assembled representatives from every nation, colony, and orbital station, holding a tablet that contained the translated alien message. "Yes, situation is simple," she said. "An unknown alien species is being exterminated. They asked for help. We're going to give it to them." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Not a single voice raised in opposition. Not one representative questioned the cost or the risk. Humanity had many flaws, but abandoning the helpless was not one of them. Within hours, the largest military mobilization in human history began. Ships poured out of Earth's orbital shipyards, rising from the lunar construction facilities, emerging from the hidden bases in the asteroid belt. The Mars Defense Fleet turned toward Earth, their red hulls gleaming in the sunlight. From Europa and Ganymede, from Titan and the outer colonies, humanity's war machine came together like pieces of a vast puzzle. Admiral Tae-hyun found himself in command of Operation Sanctuary, a name chosen by President Kyung herself. Standing on the bridge of the flagship Seoul's Fury, he watched through the viewports as more ships arrived every hour. Massive dreadnoughts bristling with kinetic cannons, sleek destroyers designed for hit-and-run tactics. Carriers loaded with fighter squadrons that had trained for decades in the art of space combat. "Final count, Admiral," reported his aide, Commander Young-ho. 412 major vessels, 800 support ships, and approximately 2 million personnel. Tae-hyun nodded grimly. It was the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled, larger than the one that had fought the Titan War, larger than the force that had ended the Belt Rebellion, and all of it was being sent to save aliens they had never met. "Do we even know what we're fighting?" asked Captain Nara from the tactical station. "Something that harvests entire civilizations," Tae-hyun replied. "Something that made peaceful. Aliens desperate enough to call strangers for help. That's all we need to know." On the ground, General So-young was preparing the largest marine deployment in human military history. The 1st, 3rd, and 7th Expeditionary Divisions were being loaded onto transport vessels, along with enough equipment to wage war on a dozen worlds. Simultaneously, her soldiers came from every corner of human space. Veterans of the corporate wars, specialists in zero-gravity combat, urban warfare experts who had learned their trade in the sprawling cities of Mars. They had never fought aliens, but they had spent centuries perfecting the art of killing other humans. It would have to be enough. "Listen up," So-young addressed her division commanders through holographic link. "We don't know what we're walking into. We don't know the terrain, the gravity, the atmosphere, or the enemy capabilities. What we do know is that somewhere out, their people are dying and they asked us for help. That means we don't come home until everyone is safe, understood?" "Understood, General," came the reply from 2 million voices. In the research laboratories of Luna Station, Dr. Jinwoo was working frantically to understand what little they knew about the alien species they were going to save. The Villani, as they called themselves, seemed to be a peaceful civilization, focused on art and philosophy. Their technology was based on harmonic resonance and crystalline structures that could manipulate energy in ways human science barely understood. "They have no weapons," Dr. Jinwoo reported to Admiral Tae-hyun during the final briefing. "No military, at all. They're complete pacifists, incapable of organized violence. And the attackers? We call them the Kreks, based on fragments of their transmissions. Hive mind species, possibly biomechanical. They consume other civilizations entirely, not just conquering them but literally harvesting every living being. Jinwoo's face was grim. Admiral, based on the timeline, the Vellani homeworld has been under attack for 6 days now. At the rate the Kreks operate, how long do we have? Taehyun asked quietly. Maybe hours. Maybe they're already gone. The fleet began its jump to faster-than-light travel 18 hours after receiving the distress call. It was the fastest mobilization in human history, but space was vast, and even at maximum speed it would take them 3 days to reach the Vellani system. As the ships entered hyperspace, President Kyung made a broadcast to the human population. Standing in her office overlooking the lights of Seoul, she spoke directly to every person in human space. "My fellow humans," she began. "Today we do something that has never been done in our history. We go to war not for territory, not for resources, not for revenge, but simply because someone asked for our help. We don't know these aliens. We don't know if they can offer us anything in return. We only know that they are dying, and they called, out into the darkness hoping someone would answer." She paused, looking directly into the camera. "We are that answer. We are the guardians they called for, and we will not let them face the darkness alone." Across human space, the reaction was swift and powerful. Factories began producing supplies for the fleet. Civilian ships volunteered to carry medical supplies and humanitarian aid. Children drew pictures of Earth's ships defending alien worlds, while their parents donated everything they could to support the mission. But not everyone was confident in humanity's chances. In the deep research labs of Titan, xenobiologist Dr. Hyejin was studying the few transmissions they had intercepted from the Kreks. What she found disturbed her deeply. "They're not just conquerors," she reported to the fleet commanders through quantum link. "They're a plague. Every signal we intercept shows them consuming civilizations with perfect efficiency. They've done this hundreds of times before, maybe thousands." "Are you saying we can't win?" Admiral Taehyun asked. "I'm saying we're facing something that has never lost, something that has eaten entire species without effort. Admiral, what if we're not the guardians the Vellani need? What if we're just the next meal on the menu?" The question haunted the command staff as they raced through hyperspace. Humanity had conquered their own world through superior firepower and tactical thinking. They had survived wars, plagues, natural disasters, and their own worst impulses. But they had never faced an enemy that consumed civilizations as easily as humans ate breakfast. On the third day, long-range sensors began picking up the Vellani system. What they found made even the most hardened military officers sick to their stomachs. "My God," whispered Captain Dong-yuk from the scout ship Busan Runner. "There's nothing left." The outer planets were dark, their surfaces stripped bare. Massive bioships, each one the size of a small moon, hung in space like bloated spiders. Between them moved smaller vessels, ferrying cargo that the human crews tried not to think about too closely. "Velen Prime is still there," reported the sensor operator. "But Admiral, it's covered in those bioships. There are hundreds of them." Admiral Taehyun stood quietly on his bridge watching the tactical display. Everything they had feared was coming true. They were too late. The Vellani were gone, consumed by an enemy that had turned their world into a processing center. "Admiral," came a quiet voice from the communication station. "We're receiving a weak signal from the planet's surface. It's Vellani. They're still alive down there." The bridge fell silent. After 6 days of horror, after watching their world be consumed, somehow the Vellani were still fighting to survive. "How many ships do the Kreks have in the system?" Taehyun asked. "Approximately 800 major vessels, sir. They outnumber us 2 to 1. Taehyun looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew, young men and women who had volunteered to travel across the galaxy to fight monsters they had never seen, to save people they had never met. They were afraid. Any sane person would be. But they were also determined. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "All vessels, battle stations. We're going in." "Sir," Commander Young-ho said quietly, "the odds The odds don't matter, Taehyun replied. Someone called for help. We answered. That's what makes us human. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Volani system, weapons powered, shields raised, ready for the largest battle in human history. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing an enemy that had never known defeat. But they were also the apex predators of a world that had spent millions of years teaching them how to kill. And for the first time in their expansion across the galaxy, the Kreks were about to learn what it meant to be hunted. The war for Valen Prime was about to begin. The morning sky above Valen Prime turned dark as massive shadows blocked out the sun. Hana stood on the observation deck of the Defense Council building, watching in horror as enormous ships descended through the clouds. These were not the sleek, crystal vessels of her people. These ships looked alive, with surfaces that pulsed and writhed like the skin of some terrible beast. Commander Hana, called Minho, her young aide, his voice shaking with fear. The outer colonies have gone silent, all of them. Hana turned from the window, her tall, graceful form moving with the fluid motion typical of her species. The Volani had evolved from peaceful herd animals, and violence was as foreign to them as breathing underwater. Their entire civilization was built on harmony, cooperation, and the pursuit of beauty and knowledge. How many ships, she asked, though she dreaded the answer. Over 300, Commander. They're doing something to our people. Minho's luminescent skin, normally a soft blue, flickered between pale white and sickly green with distress. Through the great crystal screens that served as their communication network, reports flooded in from across the planet. The invading ships were harvesting entire cities, not destroying them but taking the people. The few survivors spoke of beings that looked like a nightmare fusion of insect and machine, creatures that moved in perfect unison as if controlled by a single mind. Hana had studied the ancient records. Her people had encountered aggressive species before, but always managed to avoid conflict through diplomacy or simply by hiding. The Volani had no weapons, no military, no concept of organized violence. Their defense systems consisted entirely of energy shields and evacuation protocols. Activate the planetary shields, Hana ordered. The great barriers of energy rose around their cities, shimmering domes of light that had protected the Volani for thousands of years. But these new enemies were different. Their bioships began to pulse with a dark energy that made the shields flicker and weaken. Commander, called Jiwon from the communication station. We're receiving signals from the attacking vessels. It's not language as we know it, it's more like instructions, commands being sent to different parts of a larger organism. Hana felt her heart sink. A hive mind. She had read about such things in the old stories, but never believed they could be real. An entire species that thought as one, acted as one, consumed as one. The shields over the capital city began to fail. Cracks of darkness spread across the barrier of light like a disease. Through these gaps, smaller ships began to descend. The Volani people in the streets below looked up in wonder and fear, their natural curiosity overriding their sense of danger. We need to evacuate, Minho said. The emergency protocols. To where? Hana asked quietly. They're everywhere. Every colony, every city, every settlement. She watched as one of the bioships landed in the central plaza. Creatures poured out of it, moving with mechanical precision toward the gathered Volani. The beings were horrifying. They stood upright like the Volani, but their bodies were covered in chitinous armor that seemed to be part of their skin. Their faces were hidden behind masks that glowed with the same dark energy as their ships. They carried weapons that looked grown rather than built, organic tools of harvest and consumption. Send out the final message, Hana said suddenly. Minho stared at her. The final message? To all peaceful species in the galaxy. Tell them what has happened here. Warn them that the consumers have returned. Hana moved to the ancient communication console, one that had not been used in generations. And send out the old call. Commander, that's just a legend. The call to the guardian spirits. Send it. Hana's voice carried the authority of her position, but also something deeper. Desperation. Hope. the same emotions that had driven her ancestors to create the legend of guardian spirits who would come to protect the helpless. Minho's fingers moved over the controls. The message began to broadcast on all known frequencies used by peaceful species. It was written in the ancient poetic language of the Velani, full of metaphors and spiritual references that their people used when speaking of sacred things. Great guardian spirits of the void, the message began. We call upon you in our darkest hour. The consuming darkness has come to our world, and our children cry out for protection. We who have never raised a hand in anger beg you to shield us from the endless hunger that devours all light. The message went out into space, carried by quantum transmitters that could reach across the galaxy in mere hours. It was translated through the Velani's ancient database, which had been built from contact with hundreds of peaceful species over millennia. But there was an error in the database. A single mistranslation that would change the course of galactic history. The phrase guardian spirits was rendered in galactic standard as apex predators. The coordinates for peaceful species channels were crossed with those for military frequencies. The message that had been meant for civilizations like the gentle Zorathi or the wise Milani instead found its way to a small blue-green planet on the edge of the galaxy. A world whose inhabitants had spent their entire history learning how to kill each other more efficiently. Earth. In the Luna Station Command Center, Admiral Jiho was reviewing routine patrol reports when the communication officer, Lieutenant Deho, called out in surprise. Sir, we're receiving a distress signal. It's unusual. How so? It's in some kind of poetic language, sir. Something about guardian spirits and consuming darkness. The computer is having trouble with the translation, but it seems to be a request for military assistance. Admiral Jiho frowned. First contact protocols were clear, but they had never received a call for help from an unknown alien species. Route it to Captain Yunji in analysis. I want a full breakdown in 1 hour. On Velan Prime, the situation grew worse by the moment. The bioships had landed in every major population center. The creatures they disgorged worked with terrifying efficiency, herding the Velani like livestock. Those who tried to run were paralyzed by some kind of energy weapon. Those who tried to hide were found by others who moved like hunting hounds. Hana watched from her command center as her people were loaded onto the bioships. Men, women, children, elders, none were spared. The creatures showed no emotion, no cruelty, no satisfaction. They simply did their work with the mechanical precision of a factory. Commander, Minho whispered, the shields around our building are failing. Hana nodded. She had expected this. The defense center would be one of the last targets, but it would not be spared. She looked around at her staff, at the young Velani who had devoted their lives to protecting their people, and felt the weight of failure crushing her hearts. Has there been any response to our message? She asked. Minho checked the communications. Array. No, Commander, nothing from the Zorathi, nothing from the Milani. Even the emergency frequencies are silent. Of course they were. Hana realized with bitter clarity that the peaceful species of the galaxy would not risk themselves for strangers. They would hide, as the Velani should have hidden. They would survive, and perhaps mourn the loss of Velan Prime. But they would not fight. The building shook as something heavy landed on the roof. Through the crystal walls, Hana could see the dark shapes of the harvester creatures moving toward their last refuge. I'm sorry, she whispered to her people. I'm sorry we couldn't protect you. But even as she spoke, far across the galaxy, something unprecedented was happening. On Earth, the alien distress call had reached the office of President Kyung. Captain, Yunji's analysis had been clear. An entire civilization was being exterminated, and they had called for help. The response from humanity was swift and unanimous. Within hours, orders went out to every military installation, every spaceship, every soldier. Earth would answer the call. The greatest war machine in human history began to move. Not to conquer, not to claim territory, but to save strangers they had never met from an enemy they did not know. Admiral Tae-hyun received his orders as he stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Soul's Fury. Full mobilization, the message read. Maximum force authorized. Bring everyone home. He smiled grimly. The aliens had called for guardian spirits. They were about to get something much more dangerous. They were about to get humans.